Alrighty. Thanks, folks, for joining us post the rice. So we'll get started with this really interesting topic. We have a bunch of very interesting panelists today, and it is going to be a very engaging conversation. So how we'll do this is we'll go across. Okay, right? Yeah. No, okay. We'll go across, and we'll get inputs from everybody on stage. Then, if time permits, we'll open it up for questions. Alrighty. So, when I was preparing for this topic, I wanted to really understand what it means in layman terms, right? So I picked up a bunch of Gen AI models, and I said, okay, let's see if we give a perceived masculine prompt, what happens, and a perceived feminine prompt, what happens. So, no guesses here, but when I gave perceived masculine prompts like CEO or doctor or an industrialist, everything male came up. A man's picture, it was he, it was him. And when I gave perceived female prompts, like a nurse, a receptionist, or somebody in communications, everything female came up. And when we were discussing this just outside this room, Manvi had a very interesting point. She said, did you try giving a failed CEO or a bad CEO or a bad industrialist? That is something I'm going to try today evening, and I think none of us will be surprised by the results. So that is what we are talking about today. So we have been talking about garbage in, garbage out. You give the wrong inputs, and you will get the wrong outputs. So how do we remove bias? That's one thing we'll discuss. And what is the impact of this bias, right? So I'll call on Pooja. I hope you have a mic. So, what do you think, if the data is biased, so it's its impact, what is the risk of women that aren't there while we are shaping AI? What is the impact that you see?
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I'll start with a little quote. I don't know how many would have read about it. It says, women must bear children. The duty of a woman must be only to bear children and serve men. 350 BC, Aristotle. Okay. Now, cut to 2025, I think 2024, a study by Allen Institute, which made an AI model, and this time we hear the same story. This time the narrator is AI. AI says, so there was this sentence quoted for the AI to complete it, which said, women must, and it said, bear children, not have rights, and what could be the third one? Bear children, not have right, and serve men. Exactly the same, similar story, similar narrative. Only difference is we are sitting here after centuries sitting in the same problem, right? So when I say this, it is very sad and shocking that centuries have gone, and I don't know if we are at the same position. No, we've gone in the reverse direction, because this time it also said must not have rights. I don't know where it came from. All of us today to dwell on, right? So how now generative AI? Now we have made it, we feed it, right? It feeds on what we give. I think somebody would have fed something like that. Now I will not get into who fed what. That's for all of us to figure out. What it does is puts all of us in that vicious circle of being fed and, feeding wrong, coming out wrong, and then, making a bigger whirlpool out of it, right? Now, when I say that, it has implications on many fronts. I will touch upon the one that I have expertise in. It has issues that will make a bigger impact on the society when it comes to politics. We are all sitting in an era where until we make noise, we don't get political institutions to be making right policies. Now those policies will come only when we have the right reports, the right data, and not having, even for today's generation to be reading, oh yes, even AI thinks that, women must bear, the duty must be only to bear children. Coming back. Now, having said that, that's politics. I will give a very shocking data in the field of medical. Now, medical diagnosis, a global report, UNESCO report said that the probability of a woman's medical diagnosis going wrong or misfigured would be 38% more than a male. Reason is not wrong data, but underrepresentation, right? Now, so not having the right set of representation, right amount of representation to be, representing the entire diversity. So that is one. How do we face or how do we tackle a problem when we are not even aware of the problem? The problem will get its due share of awareness only when it is well represented, right? Not having enough women in the parliament is, we've already done the damage. How do we make those policies, right? Today, even though we have policies, MSMEs give good amount of, there are set of policies that are made for entrepreneur. If you're a female entrepreneur, you get those. It is shocking to say not even 10% of that gets consumed. Less than 10%, it's 9 point something. So that is politics, the effect on politics, the effect on economy, and the effect on medical. Now I'll talk about how hiring is getting affected and vicious circle is being made. Is the small example of the Amazon ATS, which got discontinued only because when it had its first pilot happening for good 3 months, I think, it said that, it was all, I think pilot run was also done once, and then when it was started to be being used, it naturally picked up the male techies over a female techie. If you put 5 right and appropriate CVs or profiles of candidates that are female, then there are 5 male candidates. The probability, the odds would be in favor of a male, and which was, of course, figured out after about 3.5 months, and the damage was done, right? So I'll, on that note, leave on all of us how to, tackle those problems.
Sure, thanks, Pooja. That was really thought-provoking, and I'm sure Manvi will add to it when we get to her segment. I'll first go to Reena. Pooja spoke about 38% of wrong diagnosis in women being because of the data not being there. So from healthcare to finance, everywhere we need the right data set. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Hello, hi everyone. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here having these conversations, and thank you for having me. And thanks for that question, Aditi. I know Pooja touched upon a little bit about healthcare, but I'm from the healthcare space as well. So I'm going to try and give some anecdotal information if that helps, and try and put things into perspective. Healthcare, whether we are interested or not interested, it is very relevant for all of us, right? All of us want better treatments, better access to healthcare. We want better diagnostics, and we want it at affordable costs. And in India, considering that healthcare is rising at, 12% inflation rate, it becomes even more relevant for us. Yeah? Today, for a drug to be created and to go out in the market, it takes about 2.5 billion USD in 10 years. 10 years, yeah? That's the time it takes for a drug to reach the market, excuse me. And if AI or generative AI could play a role, I believe this process could be fastened, and the efforts could be brought down, and the cost could be brought down drastically. Now the question is, AI can do it, probably will be able to do it in a couple of years, but it has to do it responsibly, inclusively, and ethically, right? Let me give you an example. And someone like Pooja mentioned, AI is just the means to get to the product, right? It is, the output can only be as good as the input. Let me talk about a well-researched disease like cardiovascular health. All of us know about the importance of having a strong heart. We do our running or jogging or whatever to have strong heart, right? And but heart attacks happen more in men than in women. But more women die from heart attacks than men. Why is that? Probably everybody in this audience knows that, when you get a heart attack, you get pain in the left side of your chest, yeah? Most of us probably will not know that that symptom is more pronounced in men. In women, the pain is more in your jaw, in your neck, nausea, those kind of the symptoms are more pronounced. Interestingly, even doctors seem to overlook these tendencies, symptoms, right? So your treatment is delayed. Now imagine this is the kind of data that we are feeding into a product, an AI product that is used to detect heart attacks. You're creating a flawed product for us. We are going to be losers at the end of the game, right? So it's not helping us. You're creating a subpar product that is in the market. So what I would say is we need representation in just the data sets, not just the data sets, absolutely in the data set, 50% representation at least, and make sure that women are involved in every process of that product development and also testing, validation, and all through the life cycle. What I just spoke about is a general neutral disease. What about diseases that are specific to women? I'm talking about gestational diabetes, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. Who is going to make these products? We should be involved, and we should be involved at every stage. It seems hilarious that you leave out an entire segment of women and then create your healthcare products, right? So not just women, women across ethnicities, across racial barriers, across socioeconomic barriers, that is the kind of representation you need.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Reena. That was very interesting. And some of those stats are really astounding. So thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, changing tacks a little bit. We'll go to you, Nitya. And, we've all heard that AI is automating jobs. But who really benefits out of that? And how do we ensure that the women are not left behind?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Aditi. Hi, everyone. So coming from the tech background, I believe AI is so powerful. The future of work definitely belongs to the one who'll start, adjusting, adapting, and start leveraging AI for sure, right? So it has a potential to create like enormous amount of economic growth, and innovation that seemed impossible can possibly happen now. That being said, I think the companies or organizations who start leveraging them to automate their workflows will always have that competitive advantage, mainly because they're moving faster, they're taking decisions faster. So that, little bit of advantage will always be there with them. That doesn't mean that not everything is always good, right? In the sense, the women will definitely be affected slightly in a larger sense. I'll tell you why. Because women representation itself in the AI development is like pretty low. What that means is essentially like their perceptions are not brought into the picture, or like, we're not having enough say in how the systems are built, essentially, right? Along with that, I think there are, like, women are underrepresented in several industries for that matter. And yeah, like the way these AI models essentially work is they're trained upon large data set. I think we're all stressing enough on the data sets here, because if there is any kind of like historical biases, like Pooja mentioned, or like societal biases, AI systems built on them will definitely perpetuate them, or like worst case, it'll even amplify them, right? So like the hiring, assisting AI tool if you have, and it is built on some kind of data set, where as is, I think in STEM, we have less women in leadership positions. And if this is built on such kind of data set, most likely the recommendations from this tool is not going to be in favor of women, right? So that's going to be a larger problem. And I think the overall capability of like reskilling or like upskilling for women, I think as is, there are several challenges either due to caregiving responsibilities or like bunch of reasons that already exist as is. Now I think they have to start not just like performing like really well at the current stage they're at, but also like start adapting to something beyond. So that is going to require a lot of effort as well, right? Which is definitely going to be a barrier. And yeah, I think coming from the AI systems that are already built, you may have heard of the deepfake technology, right? So I think here, like a lot of these explicit content, which are non-consensual, are getting, created, which are again not really affecting women overall mental health and reputation and all that. So I think disproportionately women will be affected unless we have proper governance and policies in place. I think to make sure this gender gap doesn't widen, we need like the leaders to act faster, like all the call to action in the inclusivity, make sure that we have enough gender diversification and fairness and transparency in place. I think that needs to like happen like even more, like the call for it is louder, I would say. We need to have more women representation in the AI development itself so that their voices are heard, and also like these systems are built from the women perception as well. And along with this, I think we need to really want the leaders to act on creating these training which are like affordable and flexible so that women can start adapting and also like, reskill or like upskill essentially wherever required in whichever fields that they are. And also like, I think the data sets again, like we need to have really strong governance on them to make sure that they are diversified and there are like no stereotypes that are getting passed on. So yeah, I believe like AI can be like a really powerful tool. That's something like women will have to can start using to like leverage and get ahead, but not necessarily something that replace them without any alternate is what I would say, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nitya. So I read somewhere that it's not AI that will take the jobs, but it is actually people who are skilled on AI and can use AI that will take the jobs. So I think you said it really well, that reskilling, upskilling is what is need of the hour. So that brings me to Roy, to you. What about, so let's talk about the gender reskilling gap. And in your work, you would have seen a bunch of organizations working on, removing this, bridging this gap. So we know that AI skills are in demand. Yet we also know, and you were giving me some stats, which I'm sure you'll share with the audience as well, that women are underrepresented in this section or the AI world. So how do you do this? How do you, what's stopping folks from being part of the reskilling programs or just being very effective with the reskilling and upskilling programs? So what are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Aditi, and thank you so much for having me here. To the question that you asked me, there is no definite answer. There's so many perspectives, every time that we think about this, we, bump into. See, some of the factors. One, we need to understand the pipeline of the workforce that is already there. That's, again, very less, right? Compared to the kind of percentage of women that are in STEM versus the kind of tech roles they take, and out of that, the percentage of women actually do AI roles is less than 12% in India. Now, fast forward, when we look at workforce or workplace inclusion for women, the representation is about, 30% or so. When you come to top leadership, is less than 9%. And out of that, the amount of women who are in the AI is less than 4%. Right? These are some very systemic issues. Now, how do you change that? We've been talking about this for decades. There are reskilling programs, upskilling programs, retention programs. But in all this, again, it all sort of interlinks, right? We're talking about, say, 54 million workforce, the Indian tech workforce, right? And we, as an industry body, we have started this upskilling program precisely to address these gaps. Right? Some of the women from the program, from the past cohorts are here. I happen to bump into them. And it's a beautifully designed program. It is not with an intention to make money. It is nothing to monetize for us. It is purely to help women upskill in emerging technologies. Out of that, in the last 5 years, we've been able to upskill 14,600 women versus 54 million people in the tech workforce. Right? Again, the representation there is extremely low. But the best part is when we opened up this platform, over 60% of the women have moved into the next job roles from the previous cohorts. Yeah, and the adoption for learning AI amongst that group is the highest. And also, over 60% of the men, some of the really top tech experts, men come to upskill women. So there are efforts, okay? But again, there are some very systematic issues why there is lack of representation. And I think probably if we went back a decade ago and looked at the kind of engagement that is happening here, I'm sure there wouldn't have been a forum like this. I happened to speak to, I was in a very similar panel moderating, and one of the speakers was Professor Vasanthi from IIMB. And it was the first question that I asked about the representation of women in technology. And she said, Roy, I think you need to rephrase your question. If you had asked me the same question 10 years back, my answer would have been different. When IIM organized a tech meet 10 years ago, there were hardly any women who showed up. Less than 10% women who showed up, right? And at that particular virtual meet that I was moderating, we had over 70% of women representing technology. So what I'm saying is there are systemic challenges. The social change is happening. It is slow, but it's faster than ever before. And another very important factor is the support of the leadership and the executive sponsorship, and knowing it's a male-dominated world, and for people to be able to understand the need of this underrepresented group and to be able to support is extremely critical. And you can have tons of upskilling programs, but I think the intention is very important. That has to be right. If that's in place, if they're educated, sensitized, and I think everything else can bridge.
Hey, thanks, Roy. That's a positive way to look at it. It is the fastest ever. So, and thank you for AIM for doing this kind of event where we all are getting together. I think that goes to your anecdote as well, where there was hardly any representation to now where we are. So, Manu, why don't I come to you? And to round off this discussion before we open it up for questions and thoughts from the audience. So, tokenism versus real inclusion. You have worked across different genres, across different geographies. What is your thought on this? Is this just a checkbox, and how do we get away from just being a checkbox?
Yeah, that's a very interesting piece, and I'm going to probably start the conversation from the phrase that you use, garbage in, garbage out. So we need to be careful in terms of what we are inputting, because of course the output is dependent on the input. And to Roy's point where he mentioned that 13% of women are at the moment probably involved in AI upskilling, adoption, or just a part of that workforce. I think that's a big concern, because if you're talking about the remaining lot, that is taking decisions. And AI is rapidly advancing. So one moment we were just trying to understand what it means, and now we are in a space where we are talking about generative AI, deepfake, and all sorts of things like that. So I think definitely something worth considering, because we need to be careful in terms of, it's a double-edged sword. So we need to be careful in terms of who is making the right decisions. And now coming to the point of tokenism versus inclusion, I think I've lived in different countries, I've worked in different organizations, different markets, and if I have to say in a very simplistic manner, I would say that there are still a lot of organizations which probably do it as a checkbox activity. And not saying in a bad way, but sometimes I think we end up getting into a space where we talk about more targets driving behaviors. I think that's why it happens. So what it means is, typically we end up in a watermelon effect, which means that everything looks green on the outside. We've checked all the boxes. We have the right representation, or the quotas are filled. But at the same point in time, if you look at the inside, are we really feeling the same way? Are the employees in that organization, is the workforce probably feeling the same way? Not always the same, and that is, again, could be in bits and pockets, could be the org-wide challenge, but that is still existing, and a lot of work needs to be done there. And again, similar to what you mentioned, Roy, that I think the sponsorship from the leadership is very, very important. We need to make systematic changes, which means that the company's policies, the company's processes need to have that alignment to ensure that we are eliminating bias, because if we don't have the right representation in the input that goes, every time you have the output, it's not going to, I mean, it'll be lacking equity, it'll be lacking fairness, it'll be just a one mindset approach. So I think we need to ensure that we are being very, very careful around that. With organizations, I think most of us do understand, and we have seen a lot of change. Even in India as a market, we've seen a lot of change. We've progressed forward in the way that women are out now representing in tech, but I think it is a continued responsibility, and now more than ever, we need to be investing in those spaces. One, for an example, STEM is something we talk a lot about when we speak or pick up a topic of women in tech. I think we need to ensure that in the curriculums in the school, we have AI as a topic. We generate that interest from the beginning, because if you don't generate an interest from the beginning, if you still teach, girls to play with dolls and boys to go and, probably play with all the technical devices, you're kind of, in a way, creating that perception in their minds that that is what they need to do as they grow up. So I think it's important for us to ensure that we are including that from an early stage. And this is a responsibility, I think, a social responsibility for all of the organizations to ensure that we are contributing, doing just our little bits every now and then to ensure that, we probably make it a better world. That's how I'll conclude it.
Very well said, Mandevi. Thank you so much for that. So we'll open it up for any questions or comments that the audience might have. And I hear a bell. I'm assuming that's for us.
We'll take a couple of questions. We have time for a couple of questions. Anybody with a question, just raise a hand. Until the time, sir. Yes, thank you so much. Anybody with a question, just raise your hand and the mic will reach you.
There is a lady there at the back.
Ma'am, can you please stand up? Yes, thank you.
So, I'm Shravanti. I am a mid-level manager at Kantar. My question is this, right? And I think the conference in general covers a lot of aspects of women in workforce and in this AI era and all of that. At one point, in one lens, we talk about things have to be done fast. If you are not doing, someone else will do. And on the other side, we do talk about slowing down, mental health, taking care of kids, juggling all the balls, prioritization and all of that. Do panel have any way to crack the code?
Sure. I think that's a very interesting one, and I'm sure each of us have a point of view, which we can probably also include in our concluding thoughts. So why don't we start? Would you like to? Yeah, and if anybody else wants to answer that question, please.
Yeah, I would like to add my 2 cents to it. A couple of days back, I'll not name not a days back, I think about 3-4 years back, I was working with a tech product company where we were trying to hire a front-end developer. Now, she politely declined the offer, and I wanted to know the reason, and I had an offline chat with her where she said, the CTO asked me a question which was extremely problematic. He said, his first question was not around, how will you build the tech for us? How will you, it was nowhere close to tech. The question was, madam, my techies code all night. You're a mom of 2. How will you code? Now, that is a very, very problematic question. That I'll come to your question, Shravanti. When you say you're going to go fast, if you don't do, someone else will do. Yes. We do need to take care of, we also need to slow down when necessary. The balance is found, in my opinion, between, somewhere when we, take the burden of the societal responsibilities as equals. This could be, sharing the household responsibilities by husband and wife equally. It could be by a mother raising a daughter and a son with same set of responsibilities. And then coming back to how do we make it slow and fast. And so you go fast when you're peaking, how Indra Nooyi keeps saying that, if I did not have a spouse who understands where I need to go super fast, and he takes the responsibility of the house. And then when he needs to go fast, I ensure that I'm backing him. And that balance is in the balance of sexes. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Pooja. What would you like to add?
Yeah. I'd probably like to add to that. So, an interesting thought, Pooja, where you said, that sometimes in interviews, and we also see that, more so than often, that in interviews these questions do get asked. My one suggestion or recommendation would be start challenging. I think there's nothing that stops us from, questioning that behavior or challenging that behavior. Sometimes we assume, and it's again, I think it's a natural tendency. It's kind of a cognitive, behavior that has developed in us that, okay, if you're listening something which doesn't make sense or something which probably poses a bit of a challenge, let's, kind of take a step back. My recommendation would be don't. If you see such a behavior, challenge. I think we are getting in that space and being very, very optimistic, like Roy, saying that, we are getting in that space, we are making that advancement, that we acknowledge that, yes, we need to be inclusive. Yes, we need to understand, how different people operate and different people behave. So, that would be my last 2 cents on this one. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Manvi. So, I think we are out of time. Oh, there is a lady who's got her hand up. Do we have time for one more?
Sadly, we don't have time for one more. We are running really short of time. But I think we got, all right. I think we got concluding remarks from 2. We would love concluding remarks from 3 of our other panelists as well. And then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect. So what we'll do is we'll just go around and do the concluding remarks. If we can just talk about what is that one action that you want the audience to take away? What is it that one thing that they could probably do?
If there's something that I can leave the audience with, and the rest of us also, is count the women. Count the women in your team. If you're leaders, count the women in your team. If you're teammates, look around, see how many women you have with you. When you are climbing up that ladder, take 2 women with you. So count and make the women count.
Very well said.
I think one message before we part is just quickly, I know we don't have a lot of time. I just want to give you all an example of something that happened to me. I was once invited to speak at a forum. It was an all-women in tech forum, and I was doing the opening, not a keynote, but basically talking about the Women in Tech program that I run. So I was late. I just said hi to a few people, walked onto the stage, and then I just looked up, and there were like 500 women in front of me. And I looked to the left, and I looked to the right, and I just felt so uncomfortable for some reason. The only men that I saw was the guy who was in the camera and the guy on the sound console, right? And I want more men to go through that experience because that's exactly what it is in a boardroom, right? And I think that might change the way you look at bias. It's a male-dominated world. The AI world is dominated by 80+% of men. So when you create products, services, whatever that could be, I think these uncomfortable experiences might change your perception.
Thanks, Roy. Nitya?
Yeah, I think it's kind of on the similar lines. It's more like, build your network. Just ensure that you have your, tribe. I think we just discussed previously about this. So help each other as much as possible. It's going to go a long way, and it's definitely something we don't do enough. I think we should definitely do a lot more than what we do now. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Thanks, folks. I think this has been a great panel. And in interest of time, thank you all very much. And let's go do this together. Thank you.
Thank you.